The tech industry is one of the fastest moving of any industry, constantly changing and evolving, and this means that companies have to take risks. It's impossible to predict the future or know what will be successful in a few years' time, so companies have to experiment and release things that may not work. When they fail, they can fail hard and lead to some truly strange little oddities. Tech can fail for many reasons. Perhaps the hype was unrealistic, the technology just wasn't there, and sometimes it can just flat out not work. We're going to go over some of the biggest failures of the 2000s. These are in no particular order, and it's not a scientific list, it's not based on sales or anything like that, but purely some of the most notable flops of that decade. We'll start off with something right back at the start of our time period. Released in the year 2000, the IBM Deathstar 75 GXP was supposed to be one of the best IDE hard drives on the market, featuring 7,200 RPM spindle speeds, 2 MB of cache, and 15.3 GB per platter data density. It got great reviews when it first came out, and was one of the most popular hard drives of that year, with the biggest capacity version reaching staggering sizes of 75 GB. All was going well, until some users started reporting failures, and then more users did. Eventually, the early PC forums of the day were filled with rumours and people complaining, which eventually led to a class action lawsuit on IBM, with the hard drive being nicknamed the Deathstar by disgruntled users. This was press that IBM could not come back from, and it led to them selling their hard drive division altogether. Colloquially known as Windows Mistake Edition by the press and public, Windows Millennium Edition did not get the reception that Microsoft was hoping for. Conceived as a successor to Windows 98, including some of the features of the enterprise-focused Windows 2000, it was supposed to be a stopgap, whilst the NT-based Windows XP was still in development. Windows ME introduced many new features, some of which have become standard expectations of an operating system. This included generic drivers for USB devices, system restore, automatic updates, and more. The problem was the overall system stability was terrible. Users complained of crashes and performance issues, and a whole host of crazy bugs that many attributed to the fact that it was a rushed system. About a year after, Windows XP was released, and ME was quickly forgotten. Let's take a look at a piece of software that failed massively from one of the world's biggest companies. In 2003, Lindell Lab released a virtual world called Second Life, in which people could create avatars and interact with other avatars, create buildings, take part in group activities, and much more. It gained a cult following, and whilst it's technically not an MMO, it has a similar sort of following from the people that use it. Google saw the attention that Second Life had, but also noticed that many people were using it for quite adult reasons, as the software was intended primarily for adults. They believed that if they could make a family-friendly version, they would be quids in, and the result of this was Google Lively. Google Lively was a web-based virtual world released by Google in 2008. The idea was that websites would integrate their own Lively rooms into their content and add as a sort of gateway to their community. Unfortunately, it didn't feature much content, as it didn't allow user-generated content like Second Life did, so what people could actually do inside these worlds was very small. It ended up being nothing more than a series of 3D chat rooms, and people quickly got bored of the idea. It only existed between July and December, when Google quietly discontinued Lively, without much fanfare. In every great format war since format wars became a thing, there have been winners and losers. Such was the case of the successor of the DVD, one of the most popular home media formats of all time. Two standards emerged for the successor: HD DVD, backed by Toshiba and NEC, as well as having support by Microsoft and Intel, in addition to various movie studios, went up against Blu-ray, which was backed by Sony, Panasonic, Pioneer, Samsung, LG, Philips, and more. Blu-ray won that battle, and there are many reasons why. Firstly, lots of people were confused about what exactly HD DVD was, whereas Blu-ray marks an obvious difference from its predecessor. Blu-ray also had the better hardware support, and Blu-ray players became much more widely available, especially with the introduction of the PlayStation 3. The Xbox 360 had a HD DVD add-on, but because it was released separately, it was not as successful as it could have been. They had similar levels of quality in terms of the video on the disc, and the failure is more just down to consumers' taste, rather than anything particularly wrong with the product. That being said, in China today, they have their own variant of HD DVD, known as China Blue High Definition Disc, which is heavily based off HD DVD as a standard, so in a way, it lives on. I'm bundling these two together because they both try to fill a specific gap in the market that existed in the mid-2000s. The idea was that a game console could be combined with a media player, a music player, and a PDA, and have access to the internet. This was an area that a number of devices attempted to compete, with phones like the Nokia N-Gage being one of the most famous. The market rejected these devices and ended up staying with dedicated gaming devices like the Sony PSP and Nintendo DS, with smartphones like the iPhone eventually managing to realise many of the goals these devices were aiming for. The Tapwave Zodiac was a handheld game console / PDA released in 2003 and discontinued in 2005. It ran Palm OS and promised to be a high-performance media device. It was targeted towards adults rather than the teenage and child market most video game consoles are aimed for, but it immediately had a problem in that it was rather small. It received some decent ports, such as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, Doom 2 and others, all of which had graphical capabilities which were great for 2003. The problem was really that it just didn't generate much excitement or interest. People that used it were fairly happy with it, and it usually received pretty good reviews, but it just didn't garner any real hype. It just sort of came and went, without leaving much of a mark at all. On the other hand, the Gizmondo definitely left an impression on people. The Gizmondo was released later than the Zodiac, in 2005, and was marketed as a direct competitor to Sony and Nintendo. They made bold claims about the system's power and potential, and the advertising was loud and obnoxious. They held huge lavish parties with lots of celebrities, ran a team in Le Mans, hired copious amounts of booth babes, and claimed it would be the next big thing. With such great hubris, the fall would be even greater. The lavish investment in advertising meant that the Gizmondo had to be a smash hit for the company to survive, but ultimately it was a flop. Whilst the hardware itself was capable, the games were average at best, and the price was too high. Then when the Swedish press uncovered that the company had major links to the Swedish mafia, it was all she wrote for the short-lived device, with the company going bankrupt after amassing $300 million in debt. Sony are a company that have their fingers in a lot of pies: movies, gaming, electronics, and of course music. Music is an industry that has changed dramatically since the dawn of the internet, with streaming and piracy fundamentally changing the landscape and way that music companies make money. With piracy rampant in the early 2000s, companies like Sony tried to take a stance. One of the methods they thought could help would be to introduce copy protection to their CDs. Their idea would be that the software would do two things: prevent the CD from being cloned or reproduced, as well as force the user to sign an EULA, which effectively meant they agreed not to do anything nefarious with the data on the disc. The particular copy protection in question was developed by a company called First for Internet, named Extended Copy Protection, or XCP, and released in 2005, being included in around 22 million CDs pressed by Sony BMG between 2005 and 2007. The problem with this copy protection was that it was effectively acting as a rootkit. It inserted itself into secret places within the user's PC, and there was no mention of the software within the EULA. It always ran in the background using a PC's resource, and as it inserted itself without any prompt, had no uninstaller and could even cause system crashes. This led to a bigger problem, in that several Trojan viruses and worms exploited the security holes that the rootkit left open, potentially leading to major issues for any user that simply put in a music CD into their computer. It was treated serious enough that soon most major antivirus software would remove it. The final kick in the teeth for users was when Sony attempted to release an uninstaller. All it did was unmask the hidden files that the rootkit installed and did not actually remove it, exacerbating the problems. This led to a major recall of the CDs, lawsuits and class actions against Sony, and a major embarrassment for the Japanese giant, with the negative press lasting for years. The CueCat is a little oddity released in the year 2000 as part of a range of strange products that aim to take advantage of the dot-com boom. The idea was simple: internet users would be given a device for free, and then companies would create the content that it required. The content was in the form of special barcodes that the CueCat would read. These would be printed everywhere, in catalogues, advertisements, magazines, you name it, and once the device scanned it, they would be taken directly to a specific website. They believed this was valuable to companies because they could direct them to specific URLs rather than assume the customer would be able to search for the company by themselves or potentially be deceived by a competitor with a similar sounding name. It also stopped the chance of a search engine potentially bringing up a rival company. Unfortunately, for Digital Convergence Corporation, the company that made it, nobody liked it. The press thought it was solving an issue that wasn't a problem, and consumers couldn't be bothered to use it. Bringing a magazine to the computer and scanning a barcode with a cat was more hassle than simply typing in a printed web address or using a search engine, and the companies that printed the barcodes didn't see any major uptick in traffic or use. Despite millions of devices being sent out, it was a complete flop and failed entirely. Thanks for watching this video. I know I only covered a few entries, and I may make a part 2 if you guys want it, as there's definitely a lot more potential in this category. If you like this list, let me know and I can do more of them in the future. If you have any ideas for lists that you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. As always, any like or comment is appreciated, and a subscribe is great. YouTube's recommendation system is really strange these days, so please tick the notification bell if you actually want to have any of my videos shown to you after you subscribe. For those that want to go one step further, there is a join button where you can support the channel, or you could hop into my Discord and say hello. Thanks for watching. Goodbye!